All right, guys, welcome back. We are on episode 5 of the Speed Up and Get Your Hits podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and now Apple Podcast, by the way. And so we're glad to be back. Sorry for the couple week break, guys, we've had on the show. We have three folks on this podcast that are all in different states and all over the place, and we have like multiple jobs between us, and it's scheduling can be a little bit tough sometimes, but we are going to keep this thing going. As always, I am Billy with SpecTrain. With me, I have Nick from Velox Training Group and Brennan from Vortex Edge. And we have some cool stuff we're excited to talk about tonight that we hope is helpful for you guys, especially for those of you that are shooters looking for ways to get better, which is kind of what this show is all about, and the whole reason I wanted to put this thing together, right? So we've scratched the surface on this, fellas, already a little bit on some of the episodes, but wanted to put a dedicated episode together. And we're going to talk a little bit tonight about competition shooting. For those of you that are out there, I can hear the internet trolls just firing up already, and they're just getting so excited. But we're gonna talk about it anyway. And so we're gonna kind of talk about tonight, guys, is specifically USPSA shooting, kind of why we do it, why we think it's so important for folks that want to learn how to actually get better at this whole shooting thing. What the value is, are there dangers to it? Kind of how it's impacted our shooting, how we recommend people to kind of go about it, and then, in my opinion, most importantly, how we think folks should use their experiences in USPSA and competition to build their own practice and training regimen to get the most value out of their time and out of their ammo, possibly even more importantly, right? Because competition and training are not the same thing, but we'll dive into that in here in a little bit. Okay, so guys, I will just open the floor. I know we all probably have thoughts for days on this, but who has a thought they want to kick us off with on essentially why do we think USPSA competition style shooting is important for somebody who wants to get better? What's the big advantage to that over just going to the range and training?
Oh man, I got a good one.
All right,
and
let's go.
It's probably gonna stir some FUDs up, but I don't give a shit.
Cool.
Let's do it.
The scoring metric, USPSA, right? I think it's very, very practical.
Yeah.
And I think it's not only just for gaming, but like real life, right?
Yeah.
Hits divided by time. I think it's like, man, what more do you want out of it, man? You know what I mean? And it's a really good metric to go off of and measure performance and gauge your performance and see where you're at the time. And again, it's super practical.
I agree 100%. I think the hallmark defining feature of what I would call performance shooting is shooting against a metric that accounts for both speed and accuracy, right? Slow firing at a B8 is not performance shooting, right? Not saying there's no value in it, might be a little bit, but in any practical shooting discipline, speed and accuracy have to be balanced. That's why specifically I think USPSA is so great over some of the other disciplines that are out there. It's hit factor scoring. It's the ability to drive that cognitive process of balancing speed and accuracy and figuring out how to do both at the same time, how to speed up and get your hits, right? Somebody I might have heard that somewhere. But yeah, super important. And then that scoring metric that they use in USPSA, I agree, man. I absolutely love that. It's valuable not only in competition, but in your personal training as well. And I know, Brennan, you guys, especially at Vortex Edge, I mean, you use hit factor scoring for, it seems like just about everything in y'all's training. Am I correct?
Yeah, we do. So that's actually one of the things that we introduce students to in just like our level 1 courses is hit factor scoring. And it makes a lot of sense. And I honestly wish I'd been introduced to it earlier on, just kind of like right when I was getting started, because we see the light bulb click for people kind of right away. They're like, oh, so he's like a lot faster and younger and all of that than me, right, but I'm way more accurate than him. And like half his, or 3/4 of his speed. And our times are pretty comparable because he tends to bullet hose and he gets Charlies and Deltas and I don't, and I get Alphas and Charlies. And Okay, I see that. Like it really clicks because of the diversity of skill levels for students. So
Yeah.
I think it's phenomenal. We put as much anything that makes sense to hit factor score, we do,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff, man.
Um,
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, so I was gonna say the biggest thing for me, and I think it's kind of interesting because I think all three of us encountered kind of the same thing as we got into USPSA.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start to kind of hit a plateau of I'm kind of becoming one of the best shooters that I know, you
Mm-hmm.
get into USPSA and you're immediately humbled because you're no longer even close to the best shooter,
Yep.
right? I think there's just so much value in that. And I personally know people who I just really wish they would get into USPSA because I know they would unlock a lot more potential,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they're kind of stuck because they're not there, and they're kind of capping out a little bit as far as their skill level and as far as even just their creativity of what to work on. And it's
Yep.
like, man, I know that if you shot competition, you would have a laundry list that is too long to even work through that you'd be going to the range with instead of doing the same freaking 1R1 over and
Mm-hmm.
over.
Yep.
So I think that's pretty cool because you jump into this pool of really good shooters that a lot of people don't even know exist. And now you're stacking up not only against like the classification system, but also just against other shooters. And you can go, oh, hey, like he's an A class or he's an M class shooter. How do I stack up to him? Oh, that's pretty cool. And that whole idea of just competition breeding greatness, right? Like
Yeah.
if I could be competitive against somebody else and against kind of this metric or classification system, like that tends to really drive people's skill level up. So big fan of that.
Yeah, no, can't overemphasize the importance of that, right? I think in any discipline, obviously, engaging that discipline around people that are better than you is super, super important.
Yep.
It's important not only so that you can learn things from those people simply by observing them, if not through talking to them and asking them questions, um, but it's also like you said, Brennan, just for perspective, right? Like I've seen, it's I know we've all been around those eye-opening moments for folks where you've got a guy who's maybe been on a SWAT team for 20 years and he's the guy that actually maybe dry fires and actually like practices, right? And therefore he's probably the best guy by a decent chunk on his team, right? And it's super, super easy when you've been in that spot for 5 years, start thinking that you're not only the best guy on your team, that you're about as good as you can get, right? You're just
Mm.
shooting at the limit of human function, right? And when you think that, like, you are correct, like you are shooting at your limit because your
Yep.
mind can't even compute what is really possible. And so you really lose that ability to push, right? And as soon as a guy can walk into a class or a match or whatever it is and all of a sudden see someone who doesn't have any advantage over him but's just shooting at an entire different echelon of skill level, sometimes that will instantly unlock new levels for that guy just by seeing what's possible. And so
Yep.
absolutely, you've got to be shooting around folks that are better than you guys. Absolutely do. It's one of the reasons very specifically I got into competition was because I straight up ran out of people that were better than me to shoot with, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I worked through that list. And Scott Jadlinski, one of the guys that encouraged me to get into it seriously, was like, "Hey man, like you shooting around anybody that's better than you?" And I'm like, "Not anymore." And he was like, "You need to go start shooting USPSA because you will find people that are better than you, and you will." And as a side note to that, guys, if you're those of you that are maybe getting into USPSA, there's probably more than one match in your area. Seek out matches where the good people are.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go to those ego stroke matches where there's nobody there that's above B class and you can get that easy win for the gram that you can post your placement on, right? There's no value in that. Not that there's no value, right? I have a little indoor Thursday night match that I go to where there's not a lot of great competition, but it's a chance for me to get reps on a Thursday night after dark that I wouldn't usually get a chance to get otherwise, right? But when you're looking out for those main matches, look for the ones where the good people are, and whenever possible, squad with the best people at the match. Don't go squad with your buddies. They are not going to help you get better. Seek out the best shooters there and squad with those guys. If you're there to get
That
better, that's what's
that'll
going to
change
help
how
you.
you shoot. That'll
100%.
change how you shoot matches 100%.
Yep, absolutely. That was a big thing that I always did right when I, especially when I first started, man, was just trying to sign up early, and I would just sit there and I'd watch the squad list and look for a GM, or if not a GM, a masterclass guy somewhere, right? Hop in a squad and just see how they do things, man. And you'll learn a lot. I think it's hugely impactful. So that's a great point, man, for sure.
Man, I would do like similar stuff. Like when I first started shooting 3-gun, like there was one dude that would always win. I would do similar stuff, but like I was like out for blood, man. Like
yeah,
I would squad with him to see how like where he was gaining on me, and then I would go home and like all I'm thinking about is like I'm trying to like eat this dude's heart right now.
there you go.
Like I'm trying to crush his soul, man.
100%. That's how you got it. That's how it's got to be.
It was awesome motivation.
Yeah. And that's a huge little mindset tip there, man. I think, whether or not you actually possessed the skill at that time to eat that guy's lunch, I don't know, based upon where you were and where he was, right? But that's super important, man. I cannot tell you how many times I hear things at matches like, well, I'm never going to be able to pull the trigger as fast as you do. Bro, once again, you are right. You're right. If you're thinking about it that way, you are right. I promise you, man. I'm a huge believer, after having been in this thing for the years that I have, and having trained as many shooters as I have. Man, the whole natural ability thing, man, it's so overblown. It really, really is. If you get in there and you put in the work and you have that mindset, a lot of people can shoot really, really well. Shooting is not like basketball, where unless you're 7 feet tall, you can't be successful. Pretty much anybody can run a gun, right? And can do it really well. And all you have to do is look at the legends of our sport, and you will see all kinds of shapes and sizes, right? They do not look alike. It is not like the U.S. Olympic swim team, right, where they all look like carbon copies of each other. This is not. It's an athletic sport in a sense, right? But that's not primarily what it is. It's shooting. It's a skill set. It's a technical skill set, right? And
although if you're a 21-year-old baseball player, it's really hard to keep up with that guy.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yep. Yeah, I think there's a lot of 20-year-old baseball players that could try shooting for a long time and not do it what Mr. Seiler does, though.
Yeah.
That's it's not just that, right? It's not just that, but yeah.
No.
So I'll throw in another one, which is this. I think that I think the value in USPSA and competition shooting is going to be a little bit different for folks depending on what level you are at. It's going to be super easy for folks that I think that are at a lower level of shooting, obviously, to show up to pretty much any match and simply watch what people are doing and learn stuff very easily. As you get higher, you're still going to be able to do that. But having a realistic self-assessment, I think, is going to be more and more important the higher you get, understanding exactly where your strengths and weaknesses are. And those gaps in your skill set, I think, get harder and harder to identify specifically the higher you get, right? You can watch a lot of the training and practicing that folks do, right? You can go on one of Mil-Spec Mojo's range day YouTube videos, right, and watch him shooting with his buddies at the range, and you watch him doing certain things, and you can obviously identify that Mojo has some pretty good skill gap on some of the other guys that are there, right? But then you also watch them doing some of the more quote unquote tactical stuff on the range, and if you didn't know any of those guys, you couldn't tell who's better than another, right? Because there's no scoring, there's no time. They're running around and shooting stuff, right? And not criticizing at all. They're doing good stuff for what they're trying to accomplish, right? But what I'm getting at is, USPSA will give you that hard data. It's going to tell you very, very clearly exactly where you stack up. And that's going to give you information on where exactly you can get better. That I think is going to be super, super important for folks at higher levels who actually want to get better. It's going to allow you to focus your training in specific areas and identify things you need to get better at. One of the things that I see, right, is we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but is a total shift when folks get into practical shooting in what they care about in their practice and their training. Because a lot of, there's so many folks, right, that spend, maybe 90% of their time, practicing draws and reloads or whatever it is. And all of a sudden they get into practical shooting and it's like, man, I don't even care about that stuff anymore. Right. And it's just because it's super easy to show improvement. And when you're practicing, part times on draws and reloads, be like, man, I got an extra, 100th I can shave off this time or whatever and work to that. But then when you get that data from actually going to a match, seeing where you stack up on an actual course of fire, it really exposes so much more important stuff that I think you can dig into. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Oh, 100%. I think that's so I was there before I took my first JJ class, right? Mm-hmm. I think before that I could shoot pretty well, right? Like I could shoot at Ep5. I could shoot at Ep5 all alphas in under 5 seconds, right?
Right.
But like I was placing like top 5, right? Every single match. But like I'm like, damn dude, like where do I need to like push on these dudes to win?
Yep.
And then JJ was like, dude, move your feet like this and like this. And I'm like, oh my God, dude. Like he's shaving 5 and 6 seconds off of a stage. And I'm still able to shoot in the same like controlled manner that I was shooting before. That's what, freaking pushed that. Mm-hmm. And then since then, I think I've won like 4.
Right.
So pretty freaking cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, figuring out where your weaknesses are, and then like we said before, like the whole metric thing, the whole scoring metric. All you gotta do is look at that, right? Like, the dude that won shot how many alphas, how many charlies, how many deltas, no shoots, mics, all that stuff. How many did you shoot? And then what was the times? What was the time discrepancy between you and the dude that won? And like, if you shot all alphas but you were 100 seconds slower, you're not going to win, man. Like You're probably still going to be like middle of the pack, but like it's probably your speed that, is lacking a little bit. And then you could dive into that. Like what about my speed? Is it the shooting speed? Is it my gun handling skills that are too slow? Mm-hmm. Is it the movement? Do I need to use targets to help blend positions a little bit better? Which is kind of where I was at that time that I was just talking about. But yeah, and figuring all that stuff out, and it's the journey that is the cool part for me.
Yeah.
I started out in like I've shot a bunch of competition before, but to me USPSA is very, very different. And I started out in USPSA I'm just gonna be a GM like that. That was the goal, right?
Right.
And then when I started, I'm like, dude, I don't think I'll ever stop doing this, man, because it's so freaking good for me. It's so good for all of my skills that I want to be good at. So like, even when I make GM, like I'm not going to quit.
100%. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I'll probably just move on to a different division, dude.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe one day I'll be a revolver GM. I don't know.
How awesome would that be? That's so funny. Yeah, so in spoiler, like what you were talking about, right? If you're not master class, it's almost never the shooting speed and the gun handling skills, right? It's transition and movements. It's transitions and movement, right? That's where all the time comes from, for the most part. So yeah, that's where folks learn how to take just massive chunks off of courses of fire without having to pull the trigger any faster or anything like that.
And it's interesting to me, like, so watching higher level shooters shoot, dudes who consistently crush me at matches, right? I'll watch them shoot and I'm like, he's not necessarily a better shooter than me, like, but he's doing everything correctly. He's not messing anything up, right? And if I have 100%, well, I shouldn't, because that means something else in USPSA. If I do my very best and everything comes together for me, it's like, yeah, I could be competitive with him all day long. I might beat him. right? But then I'll watch my match videos, I'll watch somebody else's, or I'll watch somebody else shoot the stage. It's like, yeah, so he just shot that very well, not perfectly, very well, but he didn't make any mistakes.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of discipline to do that through a field course. And I think that is another kind of hurdle. And then what could also be turned around to become one of your strengths is that when I think about kind of the static shooting, right, before you get into competition, I was trying to think the other day of a drill that is like longer than like 6 rounds. And I was like, I don't think there is any. And the only one I could think of was the Bear Solutions cold start drill. And I think that's 13 rounds, but it's all static. Draw 10 rounds, reload, and 3 rounds. But like you never run around and shoot 32 rounds and then get graded on it.
Yes.
Like never.
Yes.
Like, I mean, the only thing you'll get graded on is a lot of times the way they're set up, it's pass or fail, right? Like all alphas or nothing. And then it's whoever had the fastest time. Yeah. And you look at those drills and it's like, man, dog, like if you scored a drill like a Bill drill or a 4 aces drill with hit factor, then you could actually start to see where people are like really stacking up versus like, well, only 2 people shot it clean and one guy didn't drop his mag reload, so he wins, right?
Yes.
You can actually start to like measure things. So I think that's cool because honestly, like a stage, you measure so many things versus when you do something like 4 aces, which I don't have anything against 4 aces. It's one of my favorite drills. But you do something like a field stage. Now you've got to measure every transition, pretty much every split, every entry, every exit, your reloads if you have them, right? And you start realizing, oh, okay, like here's where I make up the time, right? Versus on, man, like if you're just chasing 4 aces, like, yeah, draws and reloads absolutely matter. And that's kind of all that matters almost.
Yeah.
You know,
so good, man. You know, you mentioned cold start drills, right? And cold start drills were like all the rage. I don't know, what was it, like 4 years ago or whatever now. And people used to ask me, you know, people still ask me all the time, like, hey, what's your cold start drill? You know, you start your range days with whatever. I'm like, I don't really do like, you know, cold start drills. I'm like, they're like, why? I'm like, well, I shoot matches. and a match is the best cold start drill that there is, right? Because it is not a drill that I practice every single time I go to the range. It is a course of fire that I've never seen before that was set up by someone else. Therefore, it was not set up specifically to, you know, appeal to what I like to do or my skill set, right? And like you said, Brennan, it's not just a measurement of just gun handling. It's not a measurement of just accuracy or just speed. It's going to be a full functioning course of fire that requires me to put all of the skills that a practical shooter needs to the test. And if I suck at any one of those things, I'm going to suck altogether, right? For the most part. And so I think that's a huge thing you get from competition. You really don't get anywhere else. And that is, you know, I think all of us have kind of read or trained with Steve Anderson, right? He talks about match mode, but in other words, you know, on-demand execution is a skill set that you have to build in a real way through, and you test it through competition in a way that you really can't test it anywhere else. You know, you show up to a match, you've got, you know, six courses of fire, 6 stages, whatever it is, and you've got to hold it together and execute at a high level across all those, and again with all the skills, and that is a real test of on-demand execution, unlike really what you can get anywhere else, right? And so if
there's your cold start, cold start match.
If you want to learn how to execute on demand under pressure, that would be the way to learn how to do that, I think, right?
Yeah, man, and that's giving you a certain level of it's giving you like a level of like, hey, this is what is subconscious at my current state of performance, right? Like, do I grip the gun properly through the entire 30 rounds of fire?
Yep.
Right. Can I aim properly? Can I actually hit shit throughout that 30 rounds? It's not that easy. And I think that you know, like we said before, it definitely gives you something to work at, a lot of things to work at.
Yeah.
Right. I know you guys obsess over grip. Like I do too. Like it is not an easy thing. Especially when you're shooting stuff like that, like a cold start 30 round course of fire. Like
Right.
there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. Like you want to know how to get better, go shoot one of those and you will figure it out.
Yep.
So
yeah,
100%, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very, very good stuff, guys. I think there are things as well we could maybe talk about just due to the way we've hit on this already, but I would just say that just to kind of maybe clarify this a little bit for folks, you start shooting USPSA, it is going to put an emphasis on skills that I think that are crucial for the any practical discipline that are really really underemphasized. I think across, we'll call it, the tactical shooting community.
oh
Most I've taken, I don't know, over 200 hours of training now or whatever. You go to most tactical classes. And by the way, this is going to apply to some of my classes, right? Because there's only so many hours in the day. But you go to a class and you spend a lot of time again on the mechanics, kind of gun handling skills, so forth, and then your shooting on the move block is like, I'm gonna walk towards this target, like directly at it, and just kind of shoot as I go. And I'm gonna do that, 2 or 3 times, and then that's gonna be that. And it's not gonna be for time, and I'm not trying to shoot a certain amount of rounds in a certain amount of time. And most likely, if I miss the target entirely 2 or 3 times, but the rest of my hits are in, I'm gonna get a really big pat on the back, right? Because no one actually knows how many times I shot at the target. And that's kind of the shooting on the move that we do, right?
it's such a pet peeve of mine, man. I
Yeah,
hate that stuff. I hate
100%.
it so bad.
Yeah. And then look again, if we're trying to take brand new shooters and introduce them onto the mechanics of shooting on the move and get them comfortable with that so they know how to go practice it, like I'm not saying like, hey, there's never not any reason to do that kind of drill. But what I am saying is, it's really really hard to find. I don't know of one in the industry, a tactical movement class, right? You can do CQB, but that's a whole different thing. And most civilians probably can't even really find a good place to do that. And so, I think a lot of the skills that we practice in USPSA are really, really applicable to the real world, and it's stuff that you just really don't get chances to see executed at a high level or work on in depth, kind of outside of that arena, which is it's super interesting, right? We have now niche classes in the training industry for just about anything, right? If you want to find a niche class, specifically on red dots for 2011s, if you use an X300, right, you can probably find that class somewhere. But movement and entries and exits, transition heavy classes. You don't. It's really really hard to find that stuff especially in the tactical space. So I think it really emphasizes some of those skills that a lot of really really good shooters are just kind of probably lacking on entirely. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think that unpacking that a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I think that USPSA as a whole, right? Like if you could learn to move and shoot through a stage and learn to operate at that pace, it can only help you in a tactical situation.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
did you use the word
tactical.
operate?
Yeah, I did, and I said tactical in like the next sentence.
Yeah.
It's only going to help you, right?
You want to say dynamic while you're at it, or no?
Yes, it's in a dynamic environment while you're operating tactically. Like if all of the gun handling skills and shooting can run in the background and you're able to operate at that pace, like please, I'll let me know where it would hurt you in a tactical operational situation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think it can.
So I think one of the best examples of this is our mutual friend Chris Urrutia. So got into competition, I guess, a little over a year ago, right? And just kind of really hit it hard. So I've personally watched his footwork improve just absolutely dramatically. So one of the first competition style anything he did was Billy's competition class, and I took that with Chris, and then Chris hightailed up here to work for Vortex Edge, started shooting USPSA. So our instructors, so we teach a CQB class, right? So we've got a shoot house. Chris, Justin Lipska, a few other guys, they kind of take lead on those CQB classes. It's really interesting to watch Chris teach this now, and he would not mind me saying this, right? It's really interesting to watch him teach this and teach footwork in the house. Like he was talking about just like a really simple thing, like breaking the threshold of a door with your leading foot, right? And so if I want to step into a door with my right foot, I'm going to plant my left foot right outside, and I'm going to step across. So I have a big amount of stride that I'm taking up. And I go from outside to boom all the way inside in one step, right? And I was watching him teach that, and I'm like, dude, did you learn that from USPSA? He's like, 100%. He was like, yeah. I mean, I learned how to maximize my footwork in USPSA. I know if I step outside of this shooting area with my trailing foot and enter it with my leading foot, I get more reach. And I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. And so like I looked at that and I was like, all right, I'll do that. And so then I did it, and I was like, yeah, that works. That's cool. You know, like it's pretty freaking interesting. And he's somebody who did that for a living for a long time. Right. SWAT cop in Charlotte, and was in the Marines before that. And he did it, really well. And I've talked to him at length about this, and he's like, man, if I had to go back on the job like that now, he said I would 100% be way better at that than I used to be. And he was like, and that's from competitive shooting. And the other thing he'll say about that is that he measures everything now, and so everything has a metric. And he was like, and so now I know beyond a shadow of doubt what my draw time to a 15-yard target is, and what my time to engage a target at 7 yards and 15 yards would be. He's like, I 100% know what that is. And so I would go into, if it was a fight, right, go in a lot more confident about my abilities leading up to that, that action moment. So yeah, I think that's freaking cool.
It is cool. Yep, absolutely, man. Yeah, no, it's very cool. And we've all we know enough guys in the industry, some of which are are open about saying those kind of things, and some of which are not, right? But there's obviously, guys, I don't I try to stay in my lane. I don't get too deep into teaching the tactical space, but I know all of us have trained extensively in that area and have at least force on force experience and things like that. But but a couple of things I would suggest to folks, and when you look at USPSA and don't think it has any validity to the real world. First of all, the shooting part is shooting, right? And so getting better at being fast and accurate is only an advantage. It cannot be a disadvantage. Secondly, if you know how to do something really, really quickly, it's super easy to slow it down when appropriate. If you only know how to do something slowly, you're not going to be able to do it fast all of a sudden when you need to, right?
That's the truth. Yep.
And so learning how to do things at a high level, with speed, and if as an example, you're like, man, that in USPSA they're not pieing that port or whatever. It's like, I get it. Learn how to do it fast. You can always do it slow. And so I also think that the things you develop, you just talked about the footwork, Brennan. I think a lot of that stuff, the goal in USPSA is obviously for that stuff to be subconscious, which we already talked about a little bit. It changes things how you do subconsciously, even when you're not doing the whole like stage planning routine thing, right? I talk to folks about stage planning all the time. I think it's one of the things. If I was to point out one thing, I used to say this and then I really started changing it. Like if I had to pick out one thing in USPSA that doesn't have direct application to like real world, I used to say it was stage planning. And then it's like, man, stage planning is really just a study of a problem and taking more time to solve it than you would have obviously in the real world. But the goal with stage planning, right, is to I guess really identify the correct ways to do things. And after you've been stage planning for a while, you guys know this, it becomes more and more natural to just walk into a course of fire and kind of instantly probably see a really good way to do it. Right. After you study it for a while, maybe you find some little, clarification to that or some little shortcuts or whatever. But it changes the way you look at shooting problems, the whole process of stage planning, right? And so I think it absolutely has application to any kind of practical discipline, real world or not, and can only make you better, in my opinion, which is kind of the goal for everybody. So,
100%.
Yeah, cool. I think let's pivot a little bit to, and we've talked about this a little bit already, but I want to hear from you guys. How do you use your what happens in matches and your results and so forth? How do you use that to structure your training, whether it's dry fire, whether it's live fire practice? How do the two kind of work together for you guys?
Yeah. So number one thing that I do kind of coming out of matches, and I guess this would be at my current level, maybe not. I don't think it was exactly the same when I was first starting out, but here's how I'm doing it now, right? I make sure I get match footage, so video of every stage as much as possible.
Yep.
I film it in like 0.5x, right? So I get like a real wide angle, and so that makes sure that I get my feet included, and then I watch those back at super slow speeds. I almost never watch them full speed. I generally am scrubbing, and so I'm going back and forth, going, okay, so yep, I remember this from my stage plan, right? I remember that I came over here, and I remember that I was thinking about, oh, maybe a drop step would be helpful out of this position because of this lean, right? So I'll go through and watch that, and then see if I did what I thought I should have done. Right.
Yeah.
I find that to be really, really helpful. So one of the things that I've noticed in the last maybe 2 matches or so, specifically, was that I do this weird thing. It's almost like a drop step, but I don't really move my foot. And I think JJ calls it a 0 step,
Yeah.
where your foot just kind of shifts, but it stays in position.
Yeah.
I was like, what the heck do I do that for? Like, I
Yeah.
didn't need to do that. It didn't really gain me anything, but it did cost me some time.
Right.
And so I was like, how do I fix that? And I watched it. I was doing it in almost every stage, sometimes multiple times. I was like, what the heck? So I took it to the range. I was like, why would I do that? And I automatically found, like almost right away, I figured out that it was because I was just trying to lower my center of gravity. And I was like, okay, so if I start lower, would I have to do that? And I did. And it was actually almost impossible to do because I already had so much weight down in my legs.
Yep.
I was like, sweet. All right. That's how I'm going to fix that. Right. And so now whenever I do some movement drill, I generally would tend to stand really tall, like at my start position or something like that. I'm like, all right, well, let's just get lower and see what that does for me. And like, it's starting to take that away. So I use videos, man. Like I'll watch my videos and be really picky about my performance, like the next day or something. And then just take one thing that I'm seeing maybe as like a repeat thing, and go work on that, and experiment and put things on a timer and get other people to watch me and be like, did I do it? Like, and they're like, no. And I'm like, sweet, that was great. So
I feel certain I could dig up some video reviews from that competition class you were talking about that were encouraging you to get lower in your stance. I feel like
probably
that's a whole nother thing. We don't need to get into that, but yeah, man, no, super good stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting.
Sometimes, even if you whether you know something to be true or not, I guess the reason I even decided to mention that was like, I mean, we all know about video, but until you actually see yourself doing the thing, and it's you can't argue it anymore at that point. It's like, okay, something is wrong here, right? And we need to fix this. And so yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Apart from obviously what the data of the scores tells you, having that video to review, either for yourself to review or for someone else to review, or both, is super important, and you can see things and pick up on trends and stuff.
Well, and that's a good point too, right? Like it's not enough for someone maybe who's better than you just to tell you, hey man, you should do this, right? You should get lower.
Yep.
I'm like, okay, well, I should also shoot faster and shoot more accurately and do all these things and move better and run faster.
Right.
And it's like, you kind of got to tackle things one thing at a time, right? And for me, that whole getting low thing, I didn't really understand what kind of advantage it would give me. And until I figured out, oh, like I understand what efficient footwork looks like. And if I'm not low, then I can't do my thing.
Yep.
And so that was interesting because, I do think that, if you jump into competition, there's going to be just so many things that you need to work on. Like pick the low hanging fruit first, the places where you're going to gain back the most time first, work on those things, and then refine things as you go. Right. For me, the getting low, I would say, is kind of refining some decent footwork. Right. So, anyways, just want to throw that out there.
Yeah. So I think, you can see things you can learn from your match experience. You can go super macro with it. And obviously the things that you'll really obviously know for sure when you first start is like, man, I need to work on accuracy, or I need to work on speed, or I need to work on both, right? Some really big things there. Maybe, hey man, I can't shoot on the move moving laterally. It's kind of basic skill sets, right? And then I think eventually as well, like you're saying, like after you kind of master some of that stuff, you'll start getting even more picky and kind of more granular with it, and being like, man, my entries are good, but when I enter into a really difficult position where I have kind of harder shots and so forth, I need to do a better job of entering in a way that really sets me up for success. I've kind of posted this up. I may have mentioned this in a post earlier today, but like something that specifically I'm noticing is like I'm overconfident in some of the really, really tough positions. And I need, like, my stance in those positions actually kind of matters. And if I'm kind of falling out of a position, I can't hit that 4-inch plate at 20 yards. Right. And so I actually need to make sure I'm entering in a way that lands me in closer to an ideal stance. Right. So getting kind of super granular and like specific with some of those things you're going to notice as you go farther, but there's kind of a sliding scale of macro to micro, if you will, that I think happens along the way. But yeah, bottom line is you'll learn a lot of stuff, I think. And then put that into practice in your training. I think it's super important to understand that matches and training are very different things. Matches are super beneficial for all the reasons that we've talked about. You are learning things at matches, and you are gathering data at matches, but then you still have to do the training. Matches are not training. Matches are a test. Training is setting up a way to work on a specific skill set, and you are pushing your point of failure, and then you are stopping and fixing that failure, right? And matches, you only get one shot. You only get one shot at it. You can't go back and fix stuff. And so that's what we have to do. That's what we have to do in training. So it's a very, very different thing. So I think you're only really going to get the benefit from matches, and we can prove this, but you're only really going to get benefit from matches if you are pairing it with training. We all know those guys who shoot a match every single weekend for the last 20 years, and they are still in the same spot in B class where they started, right? It's not because there's no benefit to the matches and matches don't help you get better. It's because they're missing that super key other spot, which is pairing it with good training. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
100%.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess I think key things for folks to look at, I guess, to kind of wrap that up, unless you guys have anything else, is, again, obviously you're going to look at things like speed and accuracy. I think that for most folks, when you get started, speed is a good place to start. Overall, I think that it's way harder to get super accurate and then add the speed, which will force you to be willing to give up that accuracy you fought so hard for in some cases. Or it's even harder to add the speed without giving up some of the accuracy at times, right? It's way harder to do it that way than it is to learn how to get fast and then learn how to stay fast while progressively adding more alphas, if you will, while progressively adding in that accuracy. At least that was my experience, right? So,
well, and that's that thing. Like it's easy to, if you know how to do something fast, then it's a lot easier to throttle that back a little bit versus like trying to throttle up to a speed that you've never gone to before. One of the things, Nick, that I got from you was in your class when you demo the draw, right? I think you were one of the first people I saw demoing it at a slow speed. You're like, all right, I'm going to do like a 1.5-second draw. And like your hands are just moving like so slow.
So hard.
And yeah, and I was like, but that demonstrates that he knows how to do it, the thing.
Right. Yep.
Like there's zero waste. Like he's got all this time and he's just showing, and I'm watching, it's just like watching it in slow-mo. Right. And then you do it fast. It's like, oh yeah, I can see how that was the exact same thing. He just did it quicker, you know? And it's kind of the same thing. Like if you could do something fast, it's pretty, it's not that hard to throttle it back, but it does not go the other way around. So I definitely agree on that.
Speed so much. That's why I push speed so much in classes, man. I think there's probably a group of people that would be more likely to tell you that it's harder to hit things. But dude, let me tell you, stick an Ep5 up at 5 yards and see how many people hit all alphas. Like, no, dude, speed is harder than hitting stuff. Trust me.
100%.
Hitting stuff is just a matter of gripping the gun properly, aligning your sights, and pressing the trigger appropriately. Speed, man, is
a lot more nuance.
Here's what speed does. Speed brings up a lot of tension in people, and that's when they start missing, right? So like closer open targets that where speed takes priority, I see a lot of inaccurate stuff happen on those targets.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because it's speed, man.
Yep.
Well, and how many times have you taught like a brand new shooter, right? Let's say somebody who's never fired a gun. And you walk them through everything. You talk them grip, sights, and trigger, right? You have them dry fire a few, and their very first shot, recoil control is terrible, right? The gun goes, and they're not expecting it, but they drill the X-ring because they just did everything correctly. Like the aiming part, like being accurate is not that hard, But then you add, maybe later in the day, you add some speed component where, hey, we're going to shoot, 5 shots, and they can aim. But now they're going just all over, and it's not an aiming problem.
Yep.
I know you know how to do that.
I have a really good example of this. I did a private lesson with, I'm probably not going to say exactly who it is, but they're older couple, never shot before. Okay. So we're starting at the very basic level. Okay. By the end of the 5-hour lesson, I'm like, man, let's try some transition stuff. Like they're hitting everything, bro. They were getting, so like open targets, right? 10 yards ish, about 5 yards apart. In between, they were getting like 20 splits on transitions. And I'm like, how are you guys going that fast? And they're like, well, we're just watching our dot. We're just watching our dot like you told us to. And I'm like,
okay,
cool.
Yeah,
there was no bad habits there, man. Like they were just shooting the dot. It was pretty crazy. It was cool. I wish I had it on video.
Yeah,
that's
so
cool.
With that in mind, that was as you focus on speed, you got to kind of mention what I was talking about earlier, right? Generally, pulling the trigger faster is the worst way to get faster at shooting, right? As hard as it is, try not to focus on that.
Says the man with 13 splits.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Where do you think I learned this from? So the majority of your speed on your majority of the speed you need to be looking for is transitions and movement. All right, transitions, movement, and I'll add in stage planning as well. That may be controversial, but I'll talk about that in a second. So yeah, in your transitions, just being as efficient as possible, leaving targets as soon as possible, starting on the next targets as soon as possible. and in your movements. Obviously, we can't teach a movement class, but I'll say this: start actually covering ground as soon as possible when you're done shooting, and start shooting as soon as possible whenever you stop covering ground. That's kind of the thing you need to do there. And then stage planning, I'll say this: stop counting your steps on stages.
People do that?
Oh yeah.
I've never seen people do that.
Yeah, that's a very, very popular
I shoot a
thing
go
to
shoot
do.
match though, so
Very fair. Yeah, you've shot a very, very unique. I keep telling you this. your match experience has been very unique compared to what most think of the sport is. But yeah, stop counting your steps on stages and simply try to figure out how to spend as little time not shooting as possible. That's really the hallmark of it. Spend as little time not shooting as possible. Look for opportunities to shoot on the move, and when you have to move without shooting, look for opportunities to exit as aggressively as you can. I think those are big lessons people are gonna really should look for as you kind of start the USPSA journey. Anything to add on to that, fellas?
yeah,
Not a
100%.
Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, not a whole lot of stages are designed in a way that if you shoot it where there's multiple options and one way is just significantly like shorter distance than the
Mhm.
other, like generally the stage designers, I see generally most of the time, right? The stage designers put it together in such a way where you have a couple different options. The times and the distances are going to be very, very, very similar,
Mhm.
and it's just up to you, like how you're going to execute it. If you spend your whole stage plan looking for like a shortcut as far as like the number of steps, man, you're wasting time. Pick one and start rehearsing how you're going to do it. Anyways, what are we going to say, Nick?
Mm-hmm. I was going to say entries. I see people waste time on entries
Massive.
probably more than anything else, man.
100%.
And where they're wasting time is like they're like galloping into place and like crash into that position and then get the gun up. And since they crashed into that position and waited to get the gun up and they're moving all around, it takes them an eternity to start firing those shots. So, like, if you can enter a position nice and softly with the gun up,
Mhm.
it may feel slower, but I guarantee you it is going to be light years faster.
Yep.
So, like, if you wanted to use like the 3-step entry, like JJ teaches, I use it. I think it's far superior than just running into a position because it actually gets you set up to shoot.
Mhm.
Part of that, like the last 2 steps, like what I'm thinking in my head, like the first step is the break,
Yep.
and then the last 2 steps, I'm getting my hips aligned and getting the gun up and trying to land in position, kind of like a freaking duck lands on the water, man. Like the duck don't just fall out of the sky, like he glides onto the water nice and softly, right? It'd be pretty damn funny if he fell out of the sky, but like that's what you see people do, man. They just crash into position and then wait to get the gun up, and it's like, man, that is so slow. Like you would literally gain 2-3 seconds, I would venture, on an entry if you would just enter softly with the gun up.
Yeah.
You might as well slide into position like a baseball player and then stand up. Like
And
it
then
takes
stand
about
up,
the same
yeah.
amount of time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I use that
It's so
analogy sometimes. Like so you're running from like first to second, right? And you have the option potentially to run past second, go straight to third. Like if you watch a good baseball player, right? He's watching for his cue, and sometimes you'll see him throttle his speed to where if he needs to stop at second, he can, right? And he's poised, ready to go, and he can keep going if he needs to, or they slide, right? Like it's not generally it's kind of one or the other, right? And if you set yourself up to do the next thing, like oh maybe I'm going to go to third, right? That actually is going to save him time over the long run. If he decides to slide, man, he's committed. There's no way he's going to get the third now, right? Anyways, it's kind of a similar concept for any baseball
Mm-hmm.
fans out there. But
yeah. It's kind of unfortunate that some of the way to take you'll understand this, Brennan. So the last drill we do in our core class, we call it the core drill. We're very creative with that name, but it's essentially it's all static shooting, but it has movement between 5 positions. and you have to come into a position and shoot stuff and then leave and go shoot more stuff somewhere else. So it's always unfortunate because I generally run the drill right, and my time will be like half of whatever the fastest student time was, right? And I always know they're sitting there going, man, he shot that so much faster. He pulled the trigger so much faster, and so on and so forth. And I'm always trying to talk them into like, okay, I probably did that a little bit, but I saved 3 seconds coming into every position on you guys. Like, that's really where it was. I promise. And they're all like, come
like,
on,
oh, Billy
right?
and his splits, man.
Yeah. And no one ever believes me, right? I'm almost like, one of these days what I really need to start doing is just, I need to shoot like all like 30 splits on that drill. Just for demonstration purposes, and be like, see?
You should shoot it all strong hand only.
Hey, there you go. That would do it. But yeah, because but yeah, it's really tough, to sometimes to convince folks like that's where the time actually is. I promise, it's not. It's not in the splits.
So I recently did a demo like that in a class. So I set up 2 open targets at like 7 yards, and then a piece of steel at 25.
Mm-hmm.
2 shooting positions, basically 2 boxes.
Okay.
And I was like, I need a volunteer. And dude walks up, and I'm like, I want you to shoot this as fast as you possibly can. Shoot those 3 targets from this position, run over here, shoot those 3 targets from that position. Same exact 3 targets.
Yep.
And like, I want to say he had like, there were some spicy splits. Like when he did this, I was like, oh damn, like I may have bit off more than I could shoot. But no, so like his whole time was like 8 seconds. Okay.
Yeah.
I shot it in 30 splits, moved sooner, and came into that position soft with the gun up, and I walked in between, and it was 6 seconds. So I shaved 2 seconds off of him, and I whistled in between.
Yeah.
And just landed with the gun up, and they were like, what the fuck just happened?
Right.
And I'm like, dude, I just left sooner and came into that position softly, ready to shoot. That's it. And shaved 2 seconds off of that time. And shot slower, by the way.
Yeah.
So there's that too.
There it is.
It's more about control.
It really is. Yeah. Control and efficiency, right? Efficiency. Super important. All right, guys. We're a good bit in here. Let's wrap up with our kind of final two little things here. We like to do it kind of a this week in shooting. I know we've all been doing a lot of things. I'll kick this one off. I've got because I want to get you guys feedback on it. I think you'll find it interesting. I think I mentioned this to Brennan maybe already. So I've been working on a new drill. It's kind of soul crushing, to be completely honest, but it's also fun, which is good. So, it's kind of a hybrid of a couple ideas, right? So you guys are familiar with designated target drill. I think you've seen it if you don't recognize the name. It's a drill Hwansik Kim came up with. It's for transitions, right? Where you have an array of targets, and one of the targets is your designated target, and so you shoot that to start and end the drill, but also in between every single one of the other targets. So if you have targets 1, 2, 3, and 4, you shoot target 1, shoot target 2, shoot target 1 again, shoot target 3, shoot target 1 again, shoot target 4, shoot target 1 again, right? This is really, really cool. The way he normally sets it up is, we have 2 targets on the 180 to your left and right, and then kind of a full fan of targets, maybe, a total of 6 or whatever, kind of around the clock, right? And maybe at various distances and so forth. And having one designated target, maybe you designate the one that's at hard left, lets you basically practice every single different, amount of transition, if you will, but between narrow and wide that there is, without having, a bunch of different targets. You have to do it all in a row and so on and so forth. Really, really cool drill. You can obviously pick whatever designated target you want. You can work steel in and mix paper and so forth. One of my favorite transition drills, as far as just learning the basics of mechanics across the spectrum of narrow versus wide. Another drill I really like is kind of accelerator drill, right? Because it's not about narrow and wide transitions, although those transitions are in there. It's more about throttle control and learning kind of the formulas of speed and accuracy at kind of varying distances, which is pretty cool. So And there's different ways you can shoot accelerator. Obviously, you can shoot near to far, far to near, mix it up, and there's different challenges to that. Whether you're going switching between fast and slow and fast and so forth. So the drill that I've been setting up is this. It's 4 targets. I have one target kind of off to the side at 5 yards, and then I've been setting up for me. You could do whatever distances you want, but I've been setting up 15, 25, and 35. 3 targets. Again, just kind of an accelerator, form, just kind of off the shoulder of each other, straight down the range. And I shoot at 2 strings of fire. First one being with the 5-yard target as designated target, right? So you're working throttle control between 5 and 15, 5 and 25, 5 and 35, kind of like these extreme differences in throttle control. And I do it the other way, one with the 35-yard target as designated target, right? So again, kind of working all of those different kind of combinations of throttle control, if you will. It's been very, very interesting. It's been a lot of fun. We kind of hit on this already. Most of my misses are on the 5-yard target. Yep. Yep, for sure. Not on the 35 at all. Generally really good accuracy on like 25 and 35. And then, man, when you're coming onto that 5-yard, it's so easy to press that trigger just a little bit early, isn't it?
Jailbait.
That'll get you. That'll get you. So anyway, that's kind of what I've been working on a little bit. It is it's one of those soul crushing drills that it's not hard to shoot the drill, but it's super hard to shoot the drill well, right? Or the way that you want to. So it'd be interesting. I'm gonna try to go ahead.
How do you score it? Or is it just an exercise?
It is an exercise, but I think you have to score at hit factor.
Okay.
If you want to score it, I think that's the only way to do it. A little bit more complicated due to the way there's different round counts on certain targets and so forth. But yeah, you got to score hit factor to get any real value out of it.
Yep. Cool.
I didn't know Juanzik had a drill like that, like targets in a V. So I've been doing one like that in classes for a couple years now.
Your turn the page drill.
I call it turn the page. Yeah.
Right. It's kind of like that. It's not in a V. It's more like it's in a fan, like around the clock.
I gotcha.
If you will, with one hard to your left on the 180, one hard to your right on the 180, and then just kind of a fan around the clock, if you will.
I love stuff like that.
And you just pick one of the targets as your designated. Could be the one straight down range, could be the one to the right or the left,
okay.
And you just go back and forth to that one target between every other one.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. It's really, really, really great for folks. If you have a facility that lets you set them up like that, it's a super good and efficient way again to practice kind of all the different sizes of transitions that there are. So yeah, but yours is cool too, Nick. It is.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
No.
See, I usually stick steel in the middle, and then 2 paper at like 15, and then 2 paper at like 7 yards. And then you go back to steel after every single time that you shoot the paper. But the first paper gets 2, the next paper gets 3, the next paper gets 4, and then the next paper gets 5. So it's a lot to keep track of.
Yep.
And I call it turn the page because like I feel like to be a good reader, you have to see more than just words or just one word, right? You have to see an entire sentence. You have to see the entire paragraph. And the same thing goes for transitions. Like I can't transition fast if I can't see where I'm going. So you have to be able to see everything. So that's where that turn the page came from. And then Bob Seger song's pretty dope. So
nice.
What you guys been working on or been up to over the last couple of weeks that would be interesting or helpful for folks, you think? Anything?
Yeah, so I actually got to take Steve Anderson's 2-day performance pistol course.
That's right.
Yeah, so really interesting. Probably way more than we have time to talk about.
Yes.
But kind of a couple of the highlights. So for those of you who want some context, right? I'm A class, been A class for a little bit now. And so one of the things that I really took away from Steve was number one, kind of the biggest low hanging fruit, the biggest weakness in my stage shooting, right, or my match performance, is simply kind of either getting distracted or outrunning my headlights when it comes to the actual shooting part. So like I'm 100% capable of making all the hits needed to at any USPSA match that I'd ever go to, right? The accuracy portion is really not terribly difficult. What it comes down to really is
go ahead. Sorry.
Whatever, man. I don't go to your stupid go shoot match. What it comes down to for me is just making sure that I'm actually putting my dot where I want it to send the shots. It sounds so freaking stupidly simple, but that is really kind of what it comes down to. And I will kind of get in my head about, okay, Brennan, like you got to do this thing fast. You need to make sure that you do this footwork here. You need to do these things fast. And that's kind of what's going through my mind as I step up to the plate, right? As I step up to the line to shoot. And if I'm thinking about those things, and if I'm thinking about things that I might not be 100% sure about as far as my ability to execute them, man, that's going to manifest itself. And when I get to that time, if I'm thinking, man, I need to nail that reload, or I need to remember to reload, right? That's going to be what's going to screw up, right? So for me, it was just like, man, I need to just think about centering my dot on every target and trust the speed that I've worked so hard to get, right? Like, and I'll look at myself and be like, oh man, that was slow, or oh man, my footwork was terrible here. And one of the things Steve pointed out to me, he's not real big on teaching technique especially as far as like footwork and things. He was like, man, if you're doing something that works for you, like that's cool. Like keep doing that. Here's how I do it, but I'm not going to try to change you. And most of the guys that he had there in the class were fairly high level competition shooters, and he didn't really try to change anybody, but he was like, you need to trust your footwork. You need to trust your speed. You need to trust that stuff is going to come together, because that is a subconscious skill for you. And you need to focus on doing the thing that you're here to do, which is to shoot those targets. Right. So I thought that was really interesting. Because I tend to get really overly critical with myself, and I don't really allow myself to have success, right?
Yeah.
And he talked about that. He was like, man, I think if you had more confidence going into shooting one of these stages, you would shoot a lot better. And he asked me if I thought that was true. I said, absolutely. If I felt more confident about it, yeah, I would absolutely shoot better. And he was like, well, how do you build confidence? Like, I don't know. And he was like, well, confidence is predicting future success based on past successes. And if you never allow yourself to have any successes, what are you going to build on? Right. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, that's fair. And so I shot a few drills over the course of those 2 days where I did like really well. And I'd get done, I'd shake my head because I did one little thing wrong. Right. I had, one Charlie when I wanted to have all alphas. And he'd look at me, he's like, why are you shaking your head? I was like, well, I threw a Charlie. And he's like, you shot that better than anybody else. I was like, okay, all right. And he's like, that has to be a success for you, because if you walk into a stage knowing that you are good at this thing, or you are good enough to win this stage or to shoot this stage well, then that is going to directly affect your match performance and your match performance on each stage. So I definitely took some big takeaways there that I'm definitely kind of restructuring some of how I practice. So like when I nail something, when I get something, it's like, all right, that was awesome. That was cool. Let's see if I can do it again. Right. And not being so negative or so hard on myself all the time, and giving myself specific time where I am hard on myself. Like when I'm reviewing match footage, right? I'll celebrate the match the day of. The next day, I'm like, okay, back to work. Now I'm going to be critical, right? But it's being critical, not in a negative way. So I took a lot out of it, man. It was really good. I felt like I got a lot out of it that wasn't the shooting part, and I really enjoyed that. Highly recommend.
I like that part of this class too, man. The whole recognizing success thing. I took his class, gosh, I don't know, 3-4 years ago or so. And that was a big problem that I had before, where I would shoot a drill and I'm like, that was really damn good. Now I'm going to try to crush that time. And I would like go and go and go and go. And then it would get bad because like I would hit a wall, and it's like, dude, no, Like, stop what you're doing. Like, stop when you did it really well. Like, don't try to beat that time. And I was crushing myself doing that. And then he was like, dude, why are you doing that to yourself? And I'm like, I just want to be really good. And he's like, I get that, but like, recognize those small successes that you're doing. Like, you're crushing yourself. So yeah, something that I was definitely guilty of before.
Yeah.
It's like freaking today I went and shot. I did 2 4 aces back to back in under 2 seconds, and I was like, I'm going back up to the house, man. I am donezo, because if I keep on, I will try to beat 1.5 seconds, and like, I'll be here and it'll be midnight out. I'm still trying this. So yeah, once I'm there, I quit.
Yeah, dude, that's freaking awesome. I think you and me have both kind of been chasing the back to back 4 aces sub 2.
It was a splits for me.
Okay. I had a clean 194. Of course, it wasn't on video.
Draw too, though.
Or no, 196.
It was the what?
196.
It was that draw too, though.
That was a spicy draw. 6-7.
Yeah. 66 or 67.
Yeah. I had one clean run, 196, and I was like, holy shit. And like, I didn't even believe in myself. And then I did another run right after that, 184. But it had 1 Charlie. But I had never even gotten it under 2 before. So yeah, anyways, pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mentioned this earlier, but I really do think,
I quit too.
The ability to form a realistic self-assessment is one of the greatest tools. And it's a great tool to have in life, but I think it's a great tool to have as a shooter as well. You don't want to think you're better than you are, but you also don't want to think you're worse than you are. You want to have a realistic understanding of where you are and what are your successes, what are your failures, right? And it's definitely a tough part of the journey, is that you want to get really, really good at identifying failures and identifying places that you have room to grow. But you can't let that get in the way of the actual growth process as well. And so yeah, it's a tough balance, but definitely something for folks to take note of for sure. Good stuff. All right. I guess last thing, we should take a question before we let folks go. I got one actually a couple times this week. I had 2 shooters working through this at the course on Saturday. Also got it in through the old Graham, and that was once again bringing up something that's pretty basic for some folks, but might be helpful for some. And that's just simply cross-eye dominant stuff. First of all, I thought I would mention, and I'm interested to hear what you guys say. Most of the instructors I know that teach the cross-eye dominance test teach the old, like, hold out a triangle thing and like bring it back to your face, right? And I find that can work really well, except for those folks who overthink stuff. And are like consciously thinking about where on my face should I be bringing this back to, right? And intentionally bring it back to like their nose or something. And you're like, what are you doing? So the alternative for me, if you folks out there are trying to figure this out, what I tell folks to do is look at a target. It doesn't have to be a target, but something specific, and use, hold your finger out. I saw Brennan doing it. Use your finger as like a front sight aimed at the target, right? And once you've got that lined up, simply close one eye and close the other. And what you should notice is that when you close one of your eyes, your finger will jump significantly to one side or the other. And that will tell you that whatever eye you just closed is your dominant eye. That's been the most reliable one that I've had folks do. But I was interested to hear if you guys have a better one, or what is your go-to test for that?
I do one of those too.
Yeah, that's usually what I do, is the finger or a thumb or whatever. And dude, I'll be honest, I'm just like, hey man, put the gun in front of your dominant eye. Like,
right.
It's not like, we shouldn't be overthinking this. Like,
yep.
Should I be turning my, like, nah, dude, like, just freaking bring the gun out and put it in front of your dominant eye. Like, it's not. I don't know how this is a
Well,
thing that's always
so
talked
a
about.
little bit more. So yeah, that's super easy to mention with the pistol. Obviously, yeah, like you said,
Rifle is definitely a different story, I guess.
rifle is a little bit different. What you guys got on rifle? Huh? I want to hear this I'm gonna make you guys go first before I say anything. What do you guys
I'll
got
tell you,
for cross-eye dominant shooters on the boomstick?
there's no shame in my game. Let's just keep both eyes open and rock and roll. That's that.
I mean, yeah.
Just deal with it, Nick's saying. Basically,
what I
just suck
found,
it up.
Just look at the dot, dude. Like, just put it in front of your face.
Yeah,
and keep both eyes open. Like it's not. I don't think it's a huge deal. Like when if I transition shoulders, like I can still shoot. I just keep both eyes open.
Yep.
Right?
So that's how I figured it out for because I got that question a lot. We'd always have, the cross-eyed dominant person or whatever come into class. And I was like, well, I was teaching through it one time. I was working with a guy and things didn't really seem to be working. And so I just switched the gun over to my left hand. And granted, this is pistol. And then I just presented it and it came right up to my right eye. I was like, well, both eyes are open. It's coming up to my right eye. I was like, man, hold the gun in front of your dominant eye. And then same thing with rifle. If you are just so stuck that you're closing an eye all the time, yeah, it can get confusing, right? But if you have both eyes open, rifles are so easy to get behind as far as looking through like a red dot. Like, look through it and open your other eye, man, and like you'll hit. Yeah, that's pretty much exactly the same, Nick.
Yeah, so I generally agree, right? Getting behind the dots pretty easy. Scopes are a little bit of a different deal, right? Can be a little bit more challenging, I feel like, when you're cross the
Are
dominant.
they setting the diopter up properly though?
And do they have a bright reticle? All these are important things.
I'm sorry I interrupted you, but like it just hit me. I'm like
100%. Yeah, 100% correct. So, what do you think about the folks that are cross dominant that just shoot rifle left-handed and pistol right-handed?
I mean, hey man, whatever
I don't really
floats
care.
your boat. Like if you could do it well, then cool.
Yeah, I don't think if you're cross dominant you should learn to write left-handed, right? That would be a really, really dumb suggestion, right? Now, granted, I can shoot my rifle pretty well left-handed, like, and I don't even practice it that much. Like, shooting rifles isn't that hard, but I think there's definitely advantage to shooting. You controlling your gun using your dominant hand, right? And so, if you actually want to learn how to shoot at a really freaking high level and find your peak performance, my thought would be that for most folks, even if you're cross dominant, sticking strong side would be ideal. Would you guys agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
100%.
What do you think about the folks that you put a dot like on a super high riser and still shoot strong side, but look through it with their other side eye?
No, stop doing that shit right now.
No. So I've had people tell me that.
I've never seen that before.
Yeah.
No, so people have told me that, and they're like, "Well, Mike Pannone does that," and I'm like, "That's cool because Mike Pannone has a glass eye."
That's exactly right.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm not ragging on the guy. I'm just saying that's why he does it, right? And so
he only has one eye. Yeah.
Like if I only have one, and here's the thing: is he switching shoulders? No, he's still shooting with the dominant side because that's the side that he can shoot better on.
Figured out a way to make it work.
But if you have two eyes,
yeah, I mean it's doable, but
keep both of those shits open.
Couple things. Number one, you have to turn your head into the gun so much that you're essentially negating the point of keeping both eyes open anyway, because your other eye is just looking down at the ground now, or it's looking like into your nose. You know what I mean?
Like a lazy eye.
So that's thing number one, and thing number two is you generally end up rolling the rifle over so much. It's definitely going to impact your holds left to right pretty significantly. Which again, if there was a real reason to do it, like you only have one eye, maybe there's a reason to learn all that stuff and work through it, right? Not ragging on Mike at all. Mike's a great shooter, and he's done phenomenally well working through some of the challenges he's had to work through, right? But if you don't have to do all that, My suggestion would be no. So yeah, keep both eyes open. Put your dot in front of your eye. You know, it's not that hard in general. I would agree with you guys.
Billy, maybe I missed it. What's your take on people shooting rifle on the left side, pistol on the right side, or whatever? Do you have an opinion on that? I guess I missed it.
Yeah, no. Again, so hey, nothing against it. Like I said, I can shoot my rifle pretty well left-handed, but I also, no one would suggest that you learn how to write left-handed because you're left eye dominant, right? Like that's not how that works. Like there's definitely a difference in our dexterity and control between our hands, and so running it strong side is gonna be an advantage if you actually want to learn to run your rifle like really, really well. And actually find your peak performance, it's probably going to be strong side, in my opinion.
And just learn to use your right eye, keep both eyes open, or your non-dominant eye, keep both eyes open.
Even if you can't figure that out and you have to close your strong eye, like you're probably going to be a better shooter with one eye on your strong side than you would be with both eyes on your weak side, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Like, yeah, keeping both eyes open is a thing. Like, I mean, yes, it's an advantage. You should do that. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, like, worst case, I do think, even if you absolutely for whatever reason had to close one eye, like you'd still be better off going strong.
Yep. Gotcha. Cool.
Right on, fellas. Well, we've been going for overtime per usual, but that's good. I think we had a lot of good stuff in here. Hopefully it was helpful for you guys that are listening.
Hour 20 is just normal time for us.
I know, that's just pretty much the time now. It's like we're hitting it on the nose.
Yeah. I'm just maybe that's just the new time.
I'm not doing a good job moderating here. Anyway, folks, hopefully you enjoyed that. Hopefully it was helpful. Feel free to drop us a comment down below if you have anything you'd like us to hit us up on the next episode of the Speed Up and Get Your Hits podcast. Remember, we are now on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts as well. If you weren't already aware or following Nick and Brennan, all of our information will be down below. Make sure you follow these guys, look them up, get to know about them, and train with these guys whenever you get a chance. And with that, we'll see you guys in the next episode.